Hello and welcome to The Mill. I am your host, Dusty Crane, and this week I want to talk about the fact that I think we're getting closer and closer to a Scythe LCG. Now let me explain. Jamey has been talking an awful lot about LCGs this week. He did a Sunday sit-down video last week, and he talked quite a bit about it in the Wednesday Facebook live stream. Now, he probably talked about it a lot on Wednesday because people were commenting on Sunday. It's been one of his more talked about videos recently where people, he asked a lot of questions in his Sunday sit down, and it seems to be pointing towards, if he made an LCG, what would it be about? And so this week I went ahead and took some clips from the Sunday sit down, and I took some clips from the Wednesday live stream to just kind of make my case for why I think he's really planning a Scythe, or more specifically, World of 1920 plus game that is an LCG or a card game, expandable card game, since LCG is a trademark term of Fantasy Flight. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna start with the Wednesday live stream. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this clip or show you a clip from Jamey, and let's go ahead and see what he's thinking in terms of his LCG.
The thing that I'm trying to consider for my LCG, if I end up making one, is it would be a little different, I think, than the LCGs that are out there. In that it wouldn't be a one-on-one dueling game. It would be competitive, but it would be more like a deck building game with a quarterly release schedule for new stuff that you build into the game. So each player wouldn't be obligated to buy their own stuff. I think that's one of the barriers to entry with a competitive LCG in particular, that you have multiple players buying the same stuff so that they can make the deck that's best for them. So it'd be more like you're buying more stuff for the same copy of the game that you're sharing with other people. And if you don't have everything, that's fine. Like it won't be a game that relies on you having all the expansions. That's kind of the module for Stonemaier games in general, that you can mix and match various expansions.
Okay, so Jamey's talking about a competitive deck builder, a new expansion every 3 months or so, and probably most important if you are dipping your toe into an LCG or a expandable card game would be no need to buy multiple core sets. That's something that I had a coworker give me a copy of the Lord of the Rings LCG. He was done with it, and when I was done with it, he said, "Hey, trade it, sell it, whatever." And one of the questions that came up when I was trying to find someone else that was interested in the game was, "How many core sets do you have?" And I totally did not get the reason why, but I understand now is that sometimes you want to have multiple core decks put together, or you want more than one of a certain card and there's only one in the core box set, but to really have a great deck you want to have two. So it's nice to hear that right from the get-go in Jamey's design philosophy is no need to buy multiple core decks. Let's see what else he has to talk about.
How's the LCG that I'm considering designing different than Dominion, Ascension, or Star Realms models? Would you consider any of those LCGs? That's a good question. I don't think they're too far off. I don't know the exact release schedule for those games, although I think Dominion releases like maybe one expansion a year. I think this would be little modules, like a new faction or something like that, that you inject into the game every 3 months. So it'd be a much more regular release schedule. I think that's a crucial part of a definition of an LCG, that you're releasing new content on a very regular basis. Otherwise, it is fairly similar to those. I think the other small element is that there would be an element of deck construction before you start playing the game. Not a big amount. I'm looking more at the Marvel Champions model of taking a few modular decks, kind of the smash-up model too, and putting those decks together at the beginning of the game, and then playing. So it's maybe a little bit like Smash-Up meets a deck builder meets like a deck builder being a game that you are changing your deck during the course of the game as well, meets a living card game where you have regular releases, regular new factions or packs coming out on a regular basis.
So new modules or factions, deck construction, it is going to be a part of it, before the game starts, but not, not really heavy duty deck construction. It's not like putting together a Magic deck that you want to be competitive. More the Marvel Champions, where if you're unfamiliar with Marvel Champions, is you pick a hero and it has a certain amount of cards in it, like 15 or something, and then you choose an aspect. So maybe it's justice or aggression or leadership, something like that. And then you put that deck, you add that to the deck, and then that's your cards that you're playing with. You also have some basic abilities that you toss in there. These are things that are just kind of like a way to spend resources. So you might have something like the Avengers Mansion or the Helicarrier, something like that, or there's just generic ones like Energy or Strength or something. And those would be resource cards that you can only have one of in your deck. And so the whole idea is you take your hero, you take an aspect, you take a few basic cards, smash them together, and that's your deck. So that is what he's looking at. He described it obviously as smash up meets a deck builder meets an LCG with regular factions and packs coming together. So I'm not familiar with smash up. Maybe you guys can comment in the comments and let me know kind of how that works. I mean, I know that there's just a ton of smash up expansions. Is it, just based on the box, is it like a Tyrannosaurus Rex versus space aliens or something like that? I guess I can look into that, especially if that's going to be an inspiration for whatever Jamey's, certainly not Scythe, LCG might look like. Let's go ahead and take another question from the live stream.
When I talk about this living card game plan, it sounds like you'll have another empty box to sell, or might you sell it in a box with room to fill? Yeah, so this would be, I would plan the core box for the game to hold all of the stuff that we're going to create for the game. Now, it's tough to do that 100% because plans don't always, like when you're planning a game 3 years out, things change over time. But I would be if I design an LCG, I would design the core box to hold all the cards that would ever be released, or all the components that would ever be released, and of course sleeved cards. It would hold sleeved cards, so everything would fit into the box and the insert designed for that original box. Simon said that you said you would design a large box for game to hold everything that would be released for. This is specifically for the living card game. This isn't something that I usually do. I don't like to have a lot of empty space in boxes. I like to have enough for an expansion or two, but I'm not going to put a giant box out without knowing how well the game is going to do. This is specifically for living card games. Okay, I'll read the rest of your question now. Simon says, would this mean that you would cut the packaging to almost none for the subsequent things to be released for it? And yes, the answer would be the yes there. Trying to find a way that to have very disposable, but somehow hopefully environmentally friendly packaging that you could just, when you buy the new faction or whatever it is, that you throw away the packaging and just toss the cards into your box in the insert where I've designed the slot for those cards.
Another big box to hold all expansions. Now, I think this is ambitious from the standpoint of how do you know how many expansions you're going to do. Now, Jamey has mentioned a couple of times now that in his mind he's envisioning a 3-year game. And having it be quarterly releases. So if you do something like, and I'm going to speak to Marvel Champions because it's the only LCG I know really. When you look at those, it's the hero packs kind of have the same number of cards. The story scenarios kind of have the same number of cards. And then the story boxes, as I understand, those haven't come out for Marvel yet, but as it relates to Arkham Horror and stuff like that, have a certain number. So if he already knows it's going to be a 3-year plan, and he already knows that it's going to be quarterly, then you are going to have the same set amount of cards every time. I think you can go ahead and plan ahead to have this big box that will accommodate everything. What it kind of reminds me of is my friends over at Van Ryder Games, their expansion, Hostage Negotiator Crime Wave. It was a standalone expansion, but it was a big box. And if you've ever played Hostage Negotiator itself, it's a small box. You get a lot of game in there, but it's a small box. And then the Crime Wave Negotiator, or Crime Wave, Hostage Negotiator Crime Wave, it's just the game, but you could actually fit the original box in there, and there's enough room for all of the packs that they'd made so far, and the promos, and all of the tokens and stuff like that. It was a really cool design. But let's go ahead and hear Jamey's next question.
Gerald says, for my living card game, would I consider doing 3 stories instead of 1? Like 3 packs per season, so customers can think, I only have to buy 3 packs to get a full story. I have thought about that. A lot of people mentioned that in the comments of the video, and I completely love that idea that you have maybe little campaign arcs, little story arcs. I'll have to see what's best for the game that I'm designing. What I might do is have little story arcs, and then, but just to say, if you want, you can put everything in at any time, that you're not limited to those story arcs.
Miniature story arcs. I really like this idea because, as I understand it, Arkham Horror is just very deep story, very thematic, very, well, like I said, it's story driven. And so you don't want to get invested in a story where there's like 15 expansions and maybe you're only going to get through the first 2 or 3 and then, you know, what happened? So I like the idea of there being a bunch of mini arcs in whatever this game is to become. Jamie's next question was...
Joshua says, what are some creative ways to fill the living card game base box so it has room for 3 years of expansions but doesn't seem empty when first purchased? This may be too pricey, but my first thought is a traveling trophy that never needs to go back into the box. Well, that's interesting. You could also just use foam. Foam is actually surprisingly expensive, but foam can take up quite a bit of space in the box before you need to fill it up. But I love the more creative version that you thought of there too.
What do you think? Do you like the idea of a traveling trophy for filler, or do you think that foam makes more sense? Now, as expensive as Jamie says foam is, or surprisingly expensive, I think it's probably cheaper than a trophy for filler, but I like the idea that maybe there's something that's in that box that, you know, maybe is... I don't even know if you do like a collectible, like if it is Scythe related, like if you had like one of the Scythe mechs or something like that, that would be really cool. That could be your trophy, or whoever ultimately wins the competitive game there could take that trophy home, and you wouldn't keep it in the box because, you know, you're going to be filling it with new cards. So that's a pretty cool idea. For the next video, I'm going to go ahead and get into the original Sunday sit down, the designing of an LCG. This video, I didn't want to pull too much from it because there's a great discussion that Jamie has there, and he asks a lot of questions of his community. So you really should check it out if you haven't already. It's a really good one. But the design video, this is one of the clips I pulled from it.
If you play Marvel Champions, you're not going to have more than one Iron Man. You're going to have one Iron Man in play. So you don't need to buy more than one Iron Man. In the game that I'm thinking about designing around this LCG system, it wouldn't make sense for more than one player to have the same faction or the same character. That doesn't make sense. I like the Time Story said from fairly early on that there's an end to this. And that element I am really intrigued by for the LCG model. Could you go into an LCG, could you enter the market with a new LCG or expandable card game and say, we're going to put out a new pack every 3 months for the next 3 years, and that'll be it. Our story will be complete after that. Your experience will be complete. I am leaning towards a competitive LCG for the specific theme that I'm looking at. Competitive works better than cooperative.
So some factions wouldn't make sense. A finite story and competitive over co-op, it doesn't make sense. All of these things really point me to the Scythe IP. I mean, the world of 1920 plus, it doesn't make sense to have 2 of the same Polania character with, you know, with their armies or with their companion animal. It wouldn't make sense to have 2 Rusviet players. And so I understand that it's very easy to kind of shoehorn in. We have no idea what the theme is, but a cooperative Scythe, like I don't even know what that would really look like unless you know, the parties have, you know, something else has happened in the world of 1920 plus, and all of these factions have come together to battle it out. What that might look like, that's the only aspect of cooperative that makes sense to me. So I definitely see the combative nature, the competitive nature being something that stands out. So yeah, I think all signs with Jamie mentioning his willingness to go back to the world of 1920 plus, with Jakob working on his real-time strategy game, Iron Harvest, and the fact that they probably had to build out the world a lot to work on this video game, to see there's new mechs, there's probably the same factions, there's other stuff going on there. I'm not familiar with Iron Harvest, but it just seems like Scythe is a very important IP to Stonemaier, that it gives you an opportunity to revisit that world without Jamey doing the exact same thing. I think that seems to be kind of a trend, is that it doesn't seem like he retreads the same ground very often. I mean, there's tweaks and stuff like that. So I think just a Scythe 2 with new factions probably wouldn't work, and probably wouldn't be terribly interesting to him. I would be on board. But one other thing that I thought about here, as it relates to one of the earlier questions that came up, was, and I think it also ties into kind of some of the Wingspan conversation, in terms of how do you deliver expansions where you already have a box, or you already have containers that are meant to hold cards? Like, what does that look like? So I kind of went through my collection and found a couple things to look at here. So here is a Marvel Champions expansion. This is the Green Goblin scenario pack, and it comes with 78 brand new cards. There's 2 decks of cards in here. And it houses new encounters and scenarios and things you can, mash together to make new challenges, new story, but not terribly environmentally friendly with the plastic pack and the plastic shrink inside. So maybe not what Jamey is looking at. I did remember a while back I had bought an expansion for Portal's 51st State, and this is just a cardboard pack. There may be plastic shrink wrap cards inside, but that's significantly less waste than, this full kind of clamshell case around these cards. So 51st State allies here. Cardboard, it actually says it has 50 cards, 24 tokens, and 1 rule book. So I think something like this is probably more along the lines of an expansion pack for Jamey's possible LCG. And that's really all I had for you this week. It just seems like there's way too much smoke for there not to be fire. You know what I mean? It seems like there's entirely too much talk for just something that he's not seriously considering. I mean, to already have release schedules and, what he wants the box to look like, and story arcs and stuff like that. I will say this. What I would love to see in a Scythe LCG, if there's going to be story-based content at all, bring back Ryan Lopez. The work that he did in the Rise of Fenris is fantastic, and in his writing style really matched up with the world of Scythe. So if there's going to be a world of 1920 plus, I would love for Ryan to be involved again. I think that the writing skills that he has, obviously he's demonstrated, just fit so nicely. It brings a nice consistency to the writing and the story that might be there. So it might also be an interesting challenge if he has the time to. You wrote a little bit bigger long form stories there. Like, can you break it down to a card and it still be, interesting? So that's what I have for you this week. What do you think? If it is Scythe related, are you still excited having heard, the stuff Jamey's talking about? Let me know in the comments. That's all I have for you this week. Thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.